Hello and welcome to the Marina Skua Podcast. My name's Marina. I'm a dyer and a knitter. I tech edit and design knitting patterns, and I also enjoy other crafts. So this podcast is about craft, mostly knitting and yarn, and also there are some bits of seasonal making as well. If you're just joining me for the first time, I'd like to welcome you. I know that quite a few people have subscribed since my last episode, and so it's really nice to see you, and I do hope you enjoy. So since the last episode, it has been really busy. I've had a couple of shows, so I was at Wonderwool in Wales at the end of April, and then at Wool at J13 last weekend, both of which were loads of fun. I really love going to events and actually getting to talk to people about what I'm doing, and helping people choose colours for their projects and see what people are planning on working on next. So yeah, with those things and the fact that I'm doing an enormous amount of tech editing at the moment for a couple of collections that are going to be coming out later in the year, I've not been doing a huge amount of knitting, but one thing, well, first up is I finally finished this one. If you've been watching the podcast since the beginning, you might recognise it. I started knitting it almost a year ago, like in June, and so it's taken me a long time. I'm not really quite sure why it's taken me so long. I think I got to I was planning on having it out in the autumn and then decided that it was a bit pointless because, I don't know, I wasn't going to wear it until this time of year. So I think round October I lost steam on it and stopped working on it, and it got put in a bag. And then I started working on it again over the last few weeks. So I finally finished it. If I just show you there, I really like the way it sits. So it's just hitting at my high hip there. It's a little t-shirt, but it's got contiguous sleeves there. It has moss stitch around the bottom and at the edges of the arms and over the shoulder. It's one I've designed. The yarn is a linen cotton blend by Woolly Knit. It's called Linen Luxe, and I really like the sort of slubby texture that you can see on it. So it gives almost like a burnout effect, and the cotton in it means that, like, one of the things I don't really enjoy about knitting with linen is that it's very difficult to get a properly opaque fabric. Because it has very little stretch to it, it's hard to get it so that the yarn is knitted close enough together that you don't have a lot of holes in it, creating almost like a mesh. And so that creates a see-through fabric. And then, if I'm making garments, if I'm knitting with linen, it's because I want it to be cool and, nice for wearing in the summer. But if it's see-through, then I have to wear another layer underneath, which to me kind of defeats the point. So the cotton in this kind of mitigates that, and so it fills in the gaps a bit and adds a bit of softness, which I really, really like. So I'm going to be doing a lot of work with spreadsheets on this one because it is my first garment design that I'm going to be grading. As a tech editor, I do an enormous amount of knitting maths, but this will be my first time grading my own garment rather than checking grading for other people, so it'll be very interesting approaching it from that angle. And then I'll get it off to my tech editor, and after that I will hopefully be having it test knit. So if you are interested in it, it'll work nicely for any kind of, especially any kind of plant-based fibre, but you could also do it in something with some silk in, or you could do it in a wool. It would be interesting to see how it knits up in different fibres. But yes, if you are interested in test knitting, do get in touch and I'll see if I can add you to a list, and when it's ready for test knitting I can send out the call, and if you're still up for it then I'll go for it. I'll add a link below so that you can either go through to my test knitting page or just email me straight off. Yes, so things I'm working on. I still have this shawl here from which I was knitting last time. It has got bigger, it's just taking a while to do so. I'm really loving it. So you can see it is getting to a reasonable size. So when it's finished, it'll go that way and sort of like that. So it's almost getting to the wearable stage. This is how much yarn I have left, so it's not a huge amount. And it's one that is quite nice to just make up as I go along because it's increasing at the same rate, and I'm just doing these stripes in a way that I hope is sort of aesthetically pleasing. I really like the texture. I don't know how close I can get to the camera and still allow it to focus. But the fact that they're not really solid stripes, that you get some of the teal coming through the yellow. And the idea, what I'm trying to sort of convey with this one is the idea of sunlight shining through trees in a forest. So you know when it's really cool and dark and it can be a really bright day, but under the trees it's calm and still with some bird song, and then occasionally you just get shafts of light coming through and you can spot them from miles off, and it's always just such a lovely thing. So that's sort of what I'm going for. Rays of sunlight under trees. And if you look at it like that, you get that sort of diagonal effect that they often do. So yes, again, this one I'll also be finishing at some point soon and will put out for test knitting when it is ready. I forgot to mention the yarn I'm using. This one is the Fibre company Luma, which is wool, cotton, linen and some silk. And the colours I'm using are called Blue, Dusk and Goldenmosa. And it's got an amazing drape to it, which I'm very, very pleased about. So this is going to be really nice for summer, and I think actually it'll work very nicely with this top. So I'm all excited about my summer wardrobe. And that's sort of all I'm working on at the moment. I do have one other project on my needles. I'm very much not a monogamous knitter. I've talked about this before. I usually have many, many things on the needles at once, and so for me to only have 2 things going at any given time is rather strange. But I've told myself that when I finish this one and a previous project I was working on, oh yes, there's also another finished thing which I will talk about a bit later. But yes, I'm telling myself that when I finish one thing I can start another thing, and it's trying to get me to focus just a little bit. And so now I have no garments on the needles, which means that I can start working on another jumper, which I'm excited about. I love knitting jumpers, I really do. I already have rather too many, so whether it's a jumper or a cardigan, I'm not sure. I definitely need more cardigans in my life, so I think I'll do that. But the very next thing I have lined up is, I don't have this in its skein form, which is a shame because it was very, very pretty, and now it's in a rather dense ball. I won this, well, this is yarn I bought at Edinburgh Yarn Festival. See if you can see the colours there. It's a dark sort of charcoaly grey but with bits of purple in it, which I really like because it works as a neutral but it just has some visual interest in it. The yarn is Hey Mama Wolf's Sockyarn, so it's merino yarn with rami in it, which is a plant fibre. It's a kind of nettle, and that will add a strength to it that the merino on its own would not have, because obviously for sock yarns you want a reasonable amount of durability, and I don't go for the synthetic fibres and superwash thing, so I will be really interested to see how this knits up. I did go to Edinburgh with the object of getting a couple of skeins of natural fibre sock yarn to knit some socks with and see how they turn out, because I'm not much of a sock knitter. I'm really not. I've knit 2 pairs ever. One are already very well darned. If you've watched before, you'll see that I'm a fan of darning socks. A lot of my socks are getting to the stage where they're more darn than original sock, and a few are getting to the stage where I think they're going to have to be converted into something else that is not socks, because they're doing a very poor job of covering the soles of my feet now, and they're sort of getting beyond repair. So I'm going to be filling those gaps in my sock wardrobe, and yes, I'm excited about this one. I think I'm going to be doing a fairly straightforward design. I think I'm going to design a pair because I like designing things. I've done a few things recently from other people's patterns, but I really do enjoy coming up with my own, and I've not designed a pair of socks before, so we will see how that goes. And I'm excited about this, both this colour and this yarn, to see how it wears and how it knits up, because it's not a combination I've worked with before, and I think it's going to be really fun. And it has, yeah, it's not particularly stretchy because of the Raimi, and so it'll be interesting to work with that, because I'm a fairly loose knitter, so I might have to go onto some very small needles to make it work. And other than that, I'm going to be talking in a bit about some new yarn I've got in the shop. There is my Mendip DK, which is a new range that I've got in 10 colours, and I'm also going to show you some of my naturally dyed skeins, which I have amassed quite a collection of. I'm going to be doing all of this in order to, well, not in order to, but I'm going to be having a shop update, and well, by the time this goes live, the shop update will also be live, so I'll be adding a link to the bottom for that. And yes, it's quite exciting, because I'm quite pleased with the way that my naturally dyed colours are quite different to my synthetically dyed colours, but they both sort of ranges of colours feel very me in different ways. So I'll be showing you that. During the last episode, I showed off some yarn that had just arrived in the post, which is my Mendip DK, which is this one here. And in the last episode, I was only able to show off a grey skein because they had just arrived and I hadn't had time to dye them yet. I had already planned out the colour range, and so knew what colours I was going to be doing. There were a couple of options that I wasn't sure whether I was going to go with or not, but ended up dyeing a range of 9 dyed colours and then the natural grey, so a range of 10 colours in total. And I'm going to just show you the colours themselves, talk a little bit about the inspiration behind them, because I like drawing colours from my surroundings, and I'm also going to play with some colour combinations because I really love doing that, sort of hypothetically, just seeing how colours play together. And although I have very specific taste and might not necessarily use some colour combinations myself, because, you know, I have quite a particular colour sensibility, but there are so many different ways you can combine them, and I have created the range in order to give as many options as possible for colour work or colour blocking, or, you know, just having one that contrasts a little with another. So this is the first one. It's called Sheep. I call all of my undyed colours sheep because that, well, undyed colours of wool, because, you know, it's the natural colour of the sheep themselves. So this is a blend of white and dark coloured lamb's wool. So where it's blended up, you get this lovely heathery effect, which then carries through into all of the dyed colours, which I'm really pleased with. It sort of gives it a bit of a tweedy feel. So that's the natural grey, which works lovely as neutral for the rest of the colours. I'm just going to go through them in rainbow order, well, ish. This one is called Ore. It's a sort of terracotta red, and it's inspired by, so all of the colours in this range are inspired by nature, and sort of the landscape and flora and fauna of the Mendip Hills, which is where the wool is from. The wool's from a single flock at Fernhill Farm on top of the Mendips, which is about 20 miles from me, so I try to source as locally as possible. So this one's called Ore. Those of you who are familiar with this part of the world, sort of Somerset, parts of Devon and South Wales, there is quite a specific sort of pinky red colour to the sort of pinky reddy orange, depending where you are, to the soil, which is distinctive and always used to stain my trainers when I was little. And this is kind of an homage to that. It's that sort of iron ore, slightly rusty colour. And so it's quite, as reds go, it's a very soft one, which I'm really pleased with. Next up is Fox. This is the same colour that I dye on my Mendip 4-ply, but because it's on the grey base rather than a white or a beige one, it comes out slightly differently. And that's obviously named after foxes. We get really nice orange foxes in this country, the common Vulpus vulpus, I believe. And it's, you know, one of my very favourite colours in the world. I love my burnt orange, and those of you who know me won't be at all surprised to hear me say that. Next one up is Bloom. This is my perennially popular weird yellow. I dye a specific yellow on coloured bases, and I find it a slightly weird colour because it's not a straight up yellow. It's sort of not quite mustardy, it's not quite gold, it's not quite acidy, but there's an amazing depth to it. And it's called Bloom because it's inspired by the sort of the first flush of flowers that you get in spring. Not just, you know, you get the snowdrops first, but they sort of feel like an anomaly. And then you begin to get all of the daffodils and the dandelions coming out, and then you get the oilseed rape coming out a bit later. And then suddenly the countryside is filled with yellow, and so that is what made me originally come up with the yellow colour. And then this, on this grey, is just really lovely. So it's actually a very light colour, so it contrasts well with the darker colours if you're wanting to use it for colour work. And then next up is Sage, which is just such a lovely green. I'm such a fan of this one. I do get a bit carried away with describing my colours because obviously I tend to dye colours that I really like. Occasionally I have to push a little bit outside my comfort zone to create well-rounded ranges, but as much as possible I try to dye colours that I really enjoy, and this is definitely up there. It's very much my kind of green. It's called Sage because of sage green, yummy yummy herbs, and that sort of slightly warm greyish green colour that you get on the leaves, and I'm a big fan of that one. It almost works as a neutral. That sounds like a weird thing to say. People get a bit scared of greens because I don't know, because they often contrast quite strongly with skin colour. I truly believe that there is a green out there for everyone and that people should play with them more. So in contrast to this quite warm muted green, we've got Fern, which is a much brighter one, a lot clearer, a lot more sort of sure of what it is. It's sort of a classic mid-green, I reckon, and it's good fun. Yeah, I'm pleased with how this one came out. because you know there are some greens that I'm really not a fan of, and the brighter greens are, the less likely I am to enjoy them. But this on the grey base really pleases me. And then we've got teal, which, you know, you might just say, well, teal's just a colour, isn't it? But this is named after teal ducks. I don't know if the colour came first or if the species of duck came first, but we get teal ducks on Chew Lake, which is close to the farm, to Fernhill Farm, where I get this wool. And you get them there on their way south for winter. And I like it. It's not a particularly intense teal. It's not a really bright, shouty colour. It's very subtle, and this one I really believe that pretty much anyone in the world can wear. You know, I talk about colours that people can wear. Some colours don't necessarily look good with certain people's skin tone. I'm very pale. I have a jumper that is like really, really bright red, like stronger than a tomato red. It's just insanely red. And it looks awful on me, it really does. It makes me basically look dead. It's not a flattering colour. However, I wear it anyway because I love it. It used to be my dad's. It's super comfy and I wear it because I like it. So I know that some people take into very serious consideration whether a colour's going to work with their skin tone. Some people don't care at all. I'm much more inclined that way, but I do think it's something that's worth considering. And this teal is one that I think works with pretty much anyone. It's nice. It really pleases me. It's one of the last ones I dyed in the range, because it fits in between other colours, and because the yarn showed up very close to Wonderwool, which is where I was launching the colours, I didn't know if I was going to get time to dye all of the colours I wanted to, but I'm really glad that I got this one in. Yes. And then we've got Sky, which is like a nice, strong blue. It's the colour of, you know, when the sun's set and you've lost all of that nice sort of warm glow of the sun, but it's before it's completely dark, and it's called the blue hour, and it's really good for like city photography, so you still have some light in the sky, but you don't have the sun messing things up. So this is kind of that sort of sky colour, which I'm really pleased with. It's quite a dark blue, so it contrasts really well with some of the lighter colours. So yeah, that's nice. Again, I think that will work well for a lot of people. And then we've got Plum, which is a deep, sort of warm purple. I struggle with purples a bit. There are some purples that I wear, but I'm very, very picky about them. I don't like purples that have too much blue in them. I find them a bit disturbing. So this is called Plum, well, because of plums. So you know how some fruit gets that kind of waxy bloom on it that makes it look almost dusty, and then you rub it off and it glows, and so this is that kind of plummy colour. It reminds me of the Victoria plums we used to grow where I lived when I was little. And so I am pleased that I have found a purple that I am happy to dye and I actually enjoy. It's sort of quite rich. And again, it's a warm one because I like my warm colours. And then last up, we've got Rose. And again, I'm not great at pinks. I'm sort of, I feel like I'm discovering my pinks. I'm sort of, for a long time I couldn't stand pink in any kind of form as a sort of overcorrection of, you know, girls being expected to like pink. But this one is kind of dusty. The colour, so yes, it's called Rose, which is you know, it's a standard flower. You see them all over the place. This one is specifically inspired by the outsides of the petals of the dog rose, which is a flower that we get growing wild all over the UK. And it's just sort of, it's quite soft, it's fairly unassuming, it doesn't shout at you, but it's a really warm, cosy one. And yeah, so I'm pleased with that. As with the purple, I've dyed a colour that if it was just colours that I would wear, I probably wouldn't have done, but I do want to create a nice rounded range for people, and so it's sort of, I need a pink in there, so I need to find one that works for me. So those are all the colours. I'm actually quite surprised I've managed to fit those all in my hand. And so now I'm gonna play with some colours for you. And obviously, well, perhaps not obviously, everything goes with the grey, absolutely everything. That colour combination is one I have used to make a hat. There is not a lot of contrast in there, which is something I knew about. So this hat is sort of inspired by my complete obsession with gardening at the moment. It happens every year for the past few years. I get very, very excited about growing things in the garden. This year I'm doing it on a bigger scale than ever. We've actually dug beds and put together some borders and things, and it's quite exciting. But we always try to grow some veg, and so it's just got these little sort of leafy stems coming up towards the top. Just got some nice increases on top there. I'm not going to put it on my head because my hair is behaving badly enough as it is. It's growing out and I'm not at all happy with it. It'll probably take a couple of months before I'm okay with my hair again. But yeah, so that's a fun one. I'm probably going to open test knitting for that at some point. It'll be a really easy one. And you know, it's I'm not hugely excited by warm woolly hats at the moment. So yes, it'll go out for testing when I get round to writing up the pattern. So the teal actually works really well with a lot of the colours. I'm not sure what it is about it. It's sort of that greeny blue kind of acts almost like a neutral. Like it's not, obviously it's not a proper neutral. This combination has been really popular and I can kind of see why. Yeah, there's just something really satisfying about that. You can have the blue in there. That's lovely. And there you've got a nice graduation from dark to mid-tone to light colours, which is quite pleasing. Or you can swap out the teal and use the olive instead. That's rather lovely. I think that's quite nice. Something like that. Ooh, that's a bit mad. Again, like, well, two colour combinations, so just colour pairs, I think are quite easy. Because mostly they're just down to personal taste. Some colour combinations I would literally never use. However, that's, you know, down to the person using them. Like, I would never do that. I know a lot of people who would though, and that's all down to taste. I personally like to use colours together that are quite close in hue. So, you know, I like to group together warm colours or cool ones. Or, you know, if I'm doing warm and cool, I like them to sort of bridge. Like, does that work? I think that's quite nice. Love this one. I'm sorry, I'm not shouting out what the colours are here. I'm hoping that it'll be fairly visually identifiable on screen. That is like that's the kind of colour combination, along with this one, like either of those as a pair, are the kind of thing I would have been told as a child that you should never, ever, ever put together. But I love that. I think that's really nice. But again, you won't get a huge amount of contrast between them, but it'll have a really nice soft effect. So you've got your dark colours, and they'll contrast nicely with lighter colours. Ooh, that's rather fun. Quite like that. Dropping skeins everywhere. Have I done that one already? That's quite pleasing. I think that's nice. I could definitely do a jumper in that. I would love to wear a jumper in that. Maybe with the yellow in there. Or for a really autumnal feel, chuck in the green. That'd be lovely. Oh, sorry, that was the sage green, because obviously we have two greens. If you want a bit more of a fresh feel, that's quite a sort of springy, summery combo to me. Leave that there. That's quite pleasant. And it's interesting to see how the colours work together when you swap the order they're in. Oh, good lord. They do like to escape me, so. Oh, yeah, I'm really enjoying that actually. Nice deep rich colours. Probably colours that I would wear in winter. Because I don't wear black really at all. But I do definitely have colours that I wear more in certain seasons, and I do go slightly for darker colours in the winter. I wear a lot more white in summer, as you can probably tell. Anyway, I could keep doing this for ages, and I really enjoy just the way all of them look together. So yes, I've not really talked much about the yarn itself, other than the fact that it's a DK and a lamb's wool. It's woolen spun, so it's nice and bouncy. It traps a lot of air in it, so it's quite warm but also very lightweight, which is nice because if you're making a big jumper or something, they can get quite heavy, but this will be fairly springy and light, which is pleasant. It'll be really good for colour work and steeks. So because it's woolen spun, it has sort of, you don't have a huge amount of stitch definition, which means that if you use a yarn that has a lot of stitch definition for colour work, it can work really nicely. You often end up with, if you're doing a design, it can look quite pixelated, like if you're trying to do a diagonal line, it almost looks like little steps. Whereas if you've got a woolen spun or something with a little bit of a halo on it, it sort of smooths out and blurs that line a bit, so it makes it, yeah, just smoother, and I find more visually pleasing, like a little bit softer. It's a three-fold yarn. I'm saying three-fold because the ply terminology is confusing to everyone, because ply is used for both weight of yarn and how much is actually plied together. So it's threefold. That means there are 3 strands plied together. There are 120 meters per 50 grams. I'm doing 50 gram skeins because that is something that's quite important to me. It means that you can be a lot more precise with how much yarn you buy and how much you need for your project. especially if you're doing colour work. Like if you're doing a colour work hat, like you need 50 grams of yarn for a hat. You can make a hat out of this. If you then want to do 3 colours, you can buy 3 skeins, so that's 150 grams. If you've got 100 gram skeins, you've got to buy 300 grams of yarn, which for a hat is mildly ridiculous. So yes, I strongly believe in smaller skeins. Yes, I think that's probably all I've got to tell you about it for now. If you have any questions about the yarn, do add a comment below, because I'm always happy to answer questions. And these are in the shop now, so there should be jumper quantities available of all of them. Obviously depending what size jumper you're going to make. If you're doing colour work, then yay, there will definitely be. And yes, I'll put a link to the product page in the description box below for you. I've been doing quite a lot of natural dyeing recently, which is something I'm really enjoying, because I have repeatable colours for most of my yarn ranges, which is great, and I recognise that, well, I do it because it is nice for knitters to know that they can get the same colour more than once and that it's not just one and done. But at the same time, dyeing repeatable colours, once I've come up with the recipes, it feels a lot less creative, just because, you know, I'm following a recipe that I've created and just doing the same thing each time, which is nice because I really love those colours, but also I derive a huge amount of joy from playing and experimenting and trying something and seeing how it turns out, and then probably never being able to get it quite the same again. And that's something that natural dyes are really lovely for, because I'm using dye materials that I either save in the kitchen, so things like tea and avocado and onion skins, or things that I've foraged from the local area. So I've used ivy, I've used alder, what else have I used? Dandelions, a huge number of dandelions. And that's something I really quite enjoy. So natural dyeing, I do just see as a way to connect with nature, and the yarn I'm dyeing on is from, well, let me show you some of the skeins first. Let's just do it that way around. So here are some of the colours that I have dyed up. I do quite small batches. I do batches depending on the size, on the quantity of dye stuff I have available. So with some things I'm really not going to be able to do much of it, because that I just don't have much that I can dye with, and I prefer to go for a stronger colour. So some I only have 1 skein of, but some I have up to 5 or 6 skeins of. They're 50 gram skeins. The yarn I'm using is my Mendip 4-ply base, the white one, so the sunny base, because I feel like that shows off the colours really nicely. And so because this wool is sourced from the Mendip Hills, which is local to me, a lot of the dye materials I'm using are from the same area. I mean, obviously some things like avocado and tea are not, because we'd be hard pushed to get them to grow here. But things that I'm foraging are from around here, so it's really nice to me to be able to use colour on the yarn that is sourced from the same place as the wool. I like that degree of connection, which is why the range of colours I've got in the natural dyes, you know, there's a complete absence of blues and purples and reds, because I'm not buying in dye stuff. In the back garden I do have madder and woad growing. The madder I bought at the end of last year as tiny plants, so will hopefully be ready to harvest in a couple of years, and I'll be replenishing those as I go. but again, I'm not going to be able to use them for a while because you use the roots and they require a couple of years to grow, probably 3 years for a good amount of colour to grow and produce the pigment. So I won't be using those for a good while. And the woad, I mean, we'll see how it goes. They're tiny seedlings at the moment and I feel like they should have done more. But I'm going to try planting them out soon and just see how they go. I think it's meant to be quite easy to grow. It grows as a weed in a lot of places. And so the madder will give a red, well, anywhere from sort of pinky shades to orangey ones, and you can get quite a deep red, depending how you dye with it. And the woad will give blue, and is a bit more involved because it has to be processed in the same way as indigo, which is not actually something I've ever done before, and so when the time comes that will be really interesting. And in the meantime I'm sort of playing with what I've got. So if I just show you some of these skeins, so this one I've got them labelled with what they're dyed with because there are lots and you end up with quite similar colours from some different things. So this one's with tea. So I save up the tea bags from when I drink tea because I drink enormous amounts of tea. I'm English, can you tell? And so yes, I end up with huge amounts of tea bags, so I just keep them in a box in the freezer, and when I've got enough I dye with them and they give this gorgeous colour that I'm really pleased with. I have got a stronger, more orangey colour in the past, which is wonderful, and I really enjoy that. There's something wonderfully soothing about it. Then there's older. This is from a tree at the end of my road. I think I've talked about this one before actually, possibly the tea as well. And this is from the cones, and it's this lovely sort of goldeny browny yellow, which is beautiful. Then this one, this is from dandelions in my garden, which I've modified with a mordant. I haven't mentioned my mordant, I think I've done so previously, but I use an alum and cream of tartar mordant, which is a fairly standard and innocuous one, and it's quite, I think it's considered a true mordant, so that the colours you get using it will be the same as the colour of the dye stock, so it doesn't modify the colour. I have used a modifier here. I've used a homemade iron modifier which gives this lovely green, which I'm a huge fan of. I really like sort of olivey greens. They're one of my very favourite colours and I'm quite tempted to steal these skeins for myself. Then this one is avocado, and again I save up the, I don't know if you can see there, it's a very sort of soft pinky colour. It's basically me colour, very pale, and I save up the skins and stones in a bag in the freezer. I have an entire freezer drawer dedicated to dye stuff, which is fine because we don't tend to freeze much stuff. We've got some wild garlic in, well, lots and lots of wild garlic in there that we've processed because it's only available quite briefly locally, and so we tend to save up and process it in various ways to freeze and preserve. So yes, avocado, huge fan of this one. It's very pleasing. And then also with avocado is this one. I'm not sure if you can see very well, but it has some variegation going on. It's one I did as a bundle dye, and so this one has avocado. It also has some dandelion and some tea, and so it's very subtle but really pretty. I'm quite a fan of it. I'm saying I'm a fan of all of them because I really am. I just love them. I like these really pale colours. Having said that, this one is just such a bright yellow. This is onion skins, which tends to not be a particularly fast dye. I mean, this is something I have to warn people buying natural dyes, that they will never be as fast as a synthetic dye. They're inferior to synthetic dyes in pretty much every way when you're judging the quality of a dye. They're not as fast, you often don't get as strong colours. It's not cheaper to do, it's not quicker to do. However, they're lovely. And this colour is super strong. I will expect that, you know, after a while of washing and being worn, this will fade or mature a little bit. I like the idea of colours maturing and growing with us, and then, you know, if they do fade, eventually you can dye over them. And then this one is, oh, so what I didn't mention about this one is this is actually the second dip. So this is sort of the exhaust vat of a previous onion skin vat, which came out bright orange, which I sold all the skeins of, so I can't show them to you, but it was completely fascinating to see that, you know, when you dye with one colour, with one dye stock, and there's still colour left in the water, you would expect the second, if you put yarn in that water again, you'd expect the colour coming out to be just a paler version of the previous colour, and that's not at all the case. So this is a very bright sunny yellow, and the previous one was, you know, a very, very strong orange, and it's interesting to see how that develops and how the colours change. This one is a combination of these colours. So again, it's the second batch, and I mix the batches together. And so it's this really soft, sort of peachy, nudie colour, which again is very pretty. And so yes, I find these, there are more colours, but a lot of them are sort of variants on similar. And so these are, I love them. They're very soothing and just calming. I like them, and they make me want to just knit so many things. And they're, as I said, they're quite small batches, and so I think they could lend themselves really nicely to colourwork projects, where, you know, because I don't know, there's something about natural dyes where they do just seem to all tone together quite nicely. It's quite difficult to make them clash, and so yeah, I get very tempted to just cast on many jumpers with all of the yarn I've dyed, and I shouldn't do it. I need to focus. But yes, so what I might do is show you around the garden a little bit, just to show you some of the dye plants I've got coming through, and you know, some of them are going to be very unimpressive, and my garden's always a bit of a mess, but I think I will show you that because I'm spending an enormous amount of time in the garden, and I think it'll be nice to see, so I'll do that. So I'm in the garden here. I hope you can hear me okay. I think you're going to get a lot of sort of sounds of suburbia. As you can see, it is quite, well, it's not very exciting. It's a rental, so we're not doing huge amounts with it, but we have been planting some things just to make it more exciting. So on the edge of the deck here, we've got various things in pots. I've got garlic chives and parsley and thyme there. The thyme is looking really pretty in flower at the moment. And then in this pot we've got one of the madder plants I mentioned. Now, I've never really grown madder before. I am keeping it in a pot because it can apparently be quite invasive, and I'm going to want to harvest the roots, and so having it in a pot will mean that it's much easier to do that. So then we've got some sage here. This sage keeps getting attacked by aphids, but it seems to be doing all right at the moment. This little one's a quince that we've grown from seed. That one's another quince, but it's not doing as well. These are just from fruits that I harvested a couple of years ago. Now, this one here is definitely a weed. I'm going to get rid of that. These three here, I think, are my little woad seedlings. I don't really know what they're meant to look like, so if anyone does, please do correct me if they're not. I wouldn't want to waste time nurturing things that are actually not going to serve me any purpose. And then we've got another little madder there. Pot of mint there that's coming back after the winter. The grass is, well, we had some patches in it, so we've not mown it for a while because we're growing in some new seed to cover the patches. It's got various bits of veg down here. We have calendulas over here. I think that one there is a poppy. Got some leeks that we're growing from old leeks. So you cut the bottom off, soak them in water, it starts growing roots, and then you can regrow them. We've got some wool around the edge here, which keeps the snails off. The snails have really been going for these poor chives here. This is sorrel. These along here are spinach. We'll start harvesting those to thin them out once they're a tiny bit bigger. And then these ones are lettuces. You can see we've got cardboard under the top layer of soil. That's to keep the weeds down because we do have a lot of weeds growing around here. These will be purple sprouting broccoli, these three here. This one is a courgette. The cardboard is just from when we moved house. We kept all of the boxes. We've got some teeny carrots there, and then another one there, and that one's another tiny courgette. These ones are mizuna, which I have never grown before, but I'm really liking their sort of weird leaves, and I hope they're going to be very tasty. We've got some garlic here, and then this here is rhubarb, which we're growing for the first time. You can use both the leaves as a mordant, which my friend Ria, who is a natural dyer, has been doing a lot, and I've been learning a fair bit from her. And you can also use the root as a dye, but I also really like rhubarb, and I'm hoping to actually get some to eat. So I don't want to kill the plant by stealing its roots, so I probably won't do that. These all here are calendulas, which seed really easily, and they give a lovely bright yellow dye. We've got nasturtium at the back there, which is going to be a bit red. These three here are my little stars. They make me really cheerful. I come out and check on them every day. So we've got a lupin, foxglove, and a rather fancy aquilegia. That one there is a juniper. Hopefully we'll get some berries from that at some point, which we can use for cooking and food. Then down here we've got rudbeckia, which again will give dye, sometimes called black-eyed Susan. Then these ones here are a lot more calendula. We've got a little rosemary here, which is one I took from a cutting. And then we've got some coreopsis, this one here, and we have another one just over there. That floppy one there is a campanula, which is just going to be white, so it won't give any colour. This one is yarrow. So both the yarrow and the coreopsis, I mean, I have a lot of plants here which will give some variant on yellow. So the yarrow and the coreopsis will. the back there we've got a hollyhock. That one is going to be a really dark purple, and you can use it for dyeing, and I think it's quite nice in eco printing, which is something I'm keen to give a bit more of a go to. And then this one here, this little spindly thing, is a blackthorn or a sloe. I'm not actually sure how soon it'll start producing sloes, but apparently they can be used for dyeing, and they're also wonderful in gin. So got a few ginny things with the sloes and the juniper over there. And we've got lots more calendulas here. These ones are doing quite nicely. And another loop in there, that one's going to be white. This hollyhock is going to be red. And then more calendula here, and another loop in. And big pile of wool, that was protecting the potatoes temporarily. These ones are potatoes, they're doing quite pleasingly. Then we've got nasturtium here, and these ones are Thunbergia, so also called black-eyed Susans, and we've got the fleece there in the background because it's still a bit chilly for them at night time. And then we've got the chaotic bit with the compost bin and greenhouse and random turf pile, and this down here is to try and suppress the weeds because this whole corner last summer was madness. We've got our little bee hotel. As far as I can tell, we don't have any residents yet, but it'll be nice if any show up. This is mostly my husband Ben's thing. He's very excited. One day we'd love to keep bees. I have gooseberry here. This, I feel we're very unlikely to get gooseberries because I think all of the pigeons got them before they even had a chance to fruit. And then down here we've got sort of wool border central because the slugs and snails love this corner and also really love our sunflowers. This is a little row of sunflowers here. I think we're going to have to thin out a couple, maybe. I don't want to. We'll see how they go. If they start fighting, we may have to. And another sunflower and nasturtium in the corner there. And then this bed is all just lots of mizuna, which we're sort of using as a cover crop, but it's not sprouting very quickly. And then we're going to have some more beans in here. We've got chamomile here, which are very pretty and will be lovely in teas and things. Got mess here, a bag of weeds that are drying out, so that we can chop them up and compost them. And then empty compost bags underneath, which are sort of warming up the soil so that we can put squashes in there. And then this is beans and squashes and corn. That one's a squash that we've put out somewhat early. And the idea with this is to give a go at Three Sisters, which is a Native American companion planting scheme. So the idea is that the squash provides ground cover and suppresses weeds. The corn grow straight and tall so that the beans can grow up them, and the beans then add nitrogen into the soil and enrich it for future years. So it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out. I'm not hugely optimistic about our corn. But yeah, more bed that's yet to be planted. We've got a struggle with weeds again here, but keeping on top of it. More nasturtium and chamomile, and then a honeysuckle that's coming in this year. And that's sort of it, really. Most of the things I've got growing in here are, well, in terms of dye plants, the things I've got in the beds are mostly going to be yellow. And then we've hopefully got some red and blue here, which, if they all work out, will eventually give me a really nice broad colour palette. So I hope that's been interesting. Once things are flowering more, I can give you an update, and hopefully all of that will grow in and we'll have like a lot less fence everywhere. It would be nice to cover up some of the fence because there's an enormous amount of it. And someone's just starting a lawnmower, so I'll shush now. A bit of an abrupt end to the garden tour there, thanks to the neighbour's lawnmower. So thank you very much for joining me for this month's episode. As always, I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I welcome any comments or questions you may have. A particular thank you to the people who have contributed on Ko-fi. Those small donations really help me dedicate the time to filming, so if you have the means and would like to contribute, I'll put a link below. And so many thanks to those who already have, it's truly appreciated. If you want to keep up with me in between episodes, well, you can subscribe so you don't miss an episode when they come out. You can go over to my website, which is www.marinaskua.com, and there you should find a link to sign up to my newsletter, which goes out monthly. And I'm posting fairly regularly on Instagram with what I'm up to in the meantime. So thank you very much, and until next time, I'm going to leave you, as always, with a little bit of a walk in the countryside near where I live. Bye.